All right, well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good lunch break, got to stretch your legs, wake up a little bit. I know after a couple of Zooms, I get kind of sleepy. So we're ready for the afternoon. We're ready for more awesome presentations. It looks like it's just about 1. Yep. So folks may be trickling in a little bit as they come back from lunch. But I want to make sure we have our full hour with Michelle. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Michelle, who's going to be leading this presentation.
All right, thank you, Amelia. Oops, sorry, I jumped ahead. So, hi everyone, good afternoon. Can you all hear me okay? Yeah. Okay. All right, there we go. Sorry, I'm getting started. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about what I think is the most important part of being a manager. So for me, that is developing and supporting your staff. So as a manager, but especially as a new manager, it is easy to get bogged down in all the work you need to get done. So it's sometimes hard to make time for cultivating relationships. But I personally believe that cultivating relationships with each of your individual staff is critical to achieving successful outcomes. So I'm going to be talking about that and how you can do that within the framework of the first 30 days as a new manager. But even if you're not a brand new manager, I do think that you can apply these principles at any point as you're as a manager to build better relationships with your staff. So first, let me tell you a little bit about me. I am the branch manager of the Green Road Community Library. That's part of the Wake County Public Library system. And I've been the manager there for 10 years now. When I became the manager, I had been the children's librarian for 2 years before. So I went from being peer to supervisor. And I have been supervising staff in libraries since 2000 when I got my first library assistant position. So I have about 20 years of supervisory experience. And my current team includes about 15 staff members, a mix of full-time and part-time staff. I have 3 librarians, several library assistants, and a few pages. So now I'd like to find out a little bit about you, and Amelia's going to help me by doing a Zoom poll. So are you someone who is interested in management, a new manager with less than 2 years experience, or an experienced manager with more than 2 years of experience? Hopefully you can all click on, I think you just click on which one applies to you and hit submit, and then we can see who, what you guys experience levels are. There you go. All right, so we can see from this poll that a good 89% of you are new to management. Either you're interested in management, 58% of you are new managers, so that great audience for our topic today, and about 12% of you are an experienced manager. Like I mentioned earlier, I do think that the presentation that I have today and the outcomes that I hope you'll get from it can apply to any point in your management career. So let me get started with that. So here are the session outcomes I have for today. First, I hope that it'll help you be prepared to meet with staff individually, be able to conduct a needs assessment, and that you'll gain strategies for team building. So how do you identify a great manager? This is something I was hoping I could get some of your feedback in. So if you want to put some responses in the chat, I'm wondering if I can see the chat though. Let me see. There we go. might have to go back to sharing my screen. Can you guys give some ideas for how you determine somebody's a good manager? Someone who will let you fail and help you learn from that. Okay, someone who cares about their employees and their future. Someone that's approachable, a clear communicator. All right, yeah, these are all great things that a good manager is. How about externally, if you were looking at somebody like an organization from the outside and you don't really know the manager, how would you determine they are a good manager by you know, the outcomes of their staff? Able to balance employees' needs with the needs of your library, low staff turnover, team loyalty. Great. These are great examples. Team cohesiveness. I agree on the team cohesiveness. So let me go back to sharing my screen. All right. So, well, overall, a great manager has great outcomes. So when you can see a library is working successfully, that they have staff that are engaged and provide good customer service, as they probably have a great manager helping them have those great outcomes. So how do you get great outcomes? I'm going to argue that it's by laying a foundation for a successful team. So, sorry, I'm going between screens. So I'm going to talk a little bit about 3 steps that I think will help you build a great foundation if you're a new manager, and kind of where to start. So that first step that I'm going to talk about is just meeting with your staff individually. To some people, this may seem like a no-brainer, but when I became manager in Wake County, there were no set expectations for meeting with staff. So I just, even though I had been a co-worker of all the staff here at Green Road, and I thought I understood how everything worked, I did sit down and meet with each staff member individually and to ask them specific questions. So really this first meeting is about information gathering and relationship building. So you don't want to go in with a huge agenda of things to accomplish, but you probably do want to send out an email in advance with 2 to 3 questions to everyone that you will be discussing. What I've found over time is that if you give your employees a heads up about what you're going to be talking about, they're a little bit more comfortable and confident about talking to you. Some people are going to talk to you the whole time without any prompting in advance, but some staff really struggle with on the spot answering of questions. So, you know, if you can, I would suggest that you set these to be an established regular meeting pattern. Like I said, we didn't have a frequency that we were expected to meet with our staff when I became a manager, but from the beginning, I made the goal of meeting with them quarterly. Now, did we always meet that goal? Sometimes I just couldn't get it together. Maybe I was out on extended leave, or I had low employee, you know, I had a lot of employee vacancies, so we just couldn't cover the service desk in order to have those meetings. But I always kind of came back to that and kept it as a goal in the back of my head. So I do think that that's kind of key to creating a good set of communication with your staff. It allows you to address things rapidly, to invite feedback regularly from staff, and to check on any goal progress you do have with them. But at that first meeting, you're really going to just want to listen as much as possible and ask open-ended questions. And I'm going to stop sharing again so I can ask, what are some open-ended questions that you guys have either asked your staff or have been asked before that you really recommend that others use? see. I have a couple examples. So, for example, I was going to have people say, do you have any goals currently? I see somebody says, what are your greatest challenges? What do you enjoy or not enjoy about your job? How long have you been with the organization? If you're new to that location, you definitely want to just find out what everybody's relationship with with that specific location is. Have they been there for 30 years or have they been there for 3 days? And what things they helped establish so that you know kind of what they feel tied to. And personally, I like to ask people what goals they have. And I don't think that this is just about work goals. And that may be a little bit unique to me. I don't know, maybe other people ask this too, but I do ask my staff, you know, do you have other personal goals outside of work that maybe I can help you through activities we're going to do at work? So for example, I had several library staff members who wanted to go to library school. And so when they would talk to me about what goals they have, I would ask them about their greater goal outside of that. Like if you want to be an adult services librarian, or you don't even want to work in public libraries, tell me about that. And I will look at tasks that we have here to help you build those skills while you're still working here. I even had a staff member who had a master's in library science, and she was building, she was working on a degree in criminal science. And you think, how are you going to tie that in? But, you know, we found ways. And so it was a conversation. And I, you know, I knew that was her goal, was to actually leave library science. So I was like, where do you want to build some of your skills? Do you need to get more comfortable with speaking to groups of people? Do you need to get more comfortable with working on project management? So I do think having the goals outside of their work environment are important as well. Okay, and let me go back to sharing my screen. I can't seem to see the chat when I'm also sharing my screen. So sorry for the jumping back and forth. So I saw somebody was saying they like to hear what they expect from them as well. And so one of the last things that I was going to mention with meeting with your staff individually at the beginning is, sorry, I'm going to jump ahead. You want to introduce yourself as a manager to them. So every manager has their own style and has different communication needs. So you want to let them know, you know, what you do actually know about your expectations from the beginning. So maybe you don't actually know your communication style yet, but if you do know that, for example, you prefer somebody set up an appointment with you to talk about something rather than just dropping by, you want to say that. Personally, I am a person who my door is always open to my staff. So I like to tell them that, like, please do not feel like you're imposing upon me by dropping by and telling me something that you have a concern about. Please ask questions. But if that's not your style, you want to let them know that as well. So I think that's where you're going to kind of set those expectations from the beginning so that they know how to communicate with you. And right above that, I had mentioned begin identifying individual staff needs. I think, you know, we all grew up with the golden rule, which is, you know, treat everyone as you would like to be treated, but we're all different. And what you'll find when you're working with individual staff is everybody has a different way of that they like to be managed. And it's not necessarily that you're treating people differently, is not equally. So for example, when I first became manager here, I had been working here for 2 years. I thought I understood all the staff that were here, and I had been here with the previous manager, even though we had had a gap of management for about 4 months. And the manager we had previously was very hands-off. He expected people to do what they knew needed to be done without being told to do it. And for myself and the other children's librarian, we really strived under that. We saw that as a challenge. We came up with new programs. We did collection work he didn't ask us to. We created new processes. But for some staff, they found that as an insult. And I didn't know that until I met with each staff member individually. So I had 2 retired librarians who were working as library assistants. And I knew that the previous manager thought the world of them. He thought they were like some of the best librarians ever. But when I met with them individually, they actually said that they didn't think he respected them because he did not assign them any duties. And because he didn't assign them any duties, they believed that he didn't think they could do anything. So they just didn't do anything. And so, it's really important to know that like different generations, different cultural experiences, even different sets of personal experiences are going to create situations where everybody's going to approach things differently. And I think that is important for you to ask from the beginning. If you think about it, what kind of supervisor are you looking for? What do you actually respond to? Do you want somebody to give you more overarching goals and say, just go for it? Or do you need really specific tasks? Because everybody's different. So, all right. So once you've met with all your staff members, I'm going to say you're going to want to use that information to create a needs assessment. So a needs assessment is basically what it sounds like. So that's just a systematic review of what an organization needs in order to reach desired outcomes. So it can be formal, but I'm talking about it more in the informal sense of gathering information and synthesizing it to make your own observations and analysis, as our picture has. So the first step, obviously, is going to be observe. So it's really easy to want to come in and just make lots of changes. So like I said, I had been working in this location for 2 years before I became manager. So I knew what was good and what needed fixed. But sometimes you just have to hold your horses a little bit and observe, because your experience as a manager is going to be a little bit different than one as a coworker. So really take the time to observe what is working and what is not. And then you're going to want to utilize that information that you gathered from the individual staff meetings. A lot of things will be revealed in that. Like I said, I thought I knew this location. I talked a lot about it in my interview, and I had all kinds of strategies that I was ready to put in place. And then when I started meeting with staff, I learned a lot about what wasn't working in a different way. So also when you meet with individuals, you'll start to come up with a list of responsibilities that each staff member has. And if there isn't already some kind of chart that shows you what their individual responsibilities are, you're probably going to want to create something like that. So I actually have a chart that lists all the duties at our location, and then all the staff member across the top. And I pull that up every time I have a quarterly staff meeting with my individual staff members to make sure that it's actively reflecting what they're currently working on, because it changes. So for example, I had a short period where I had 3 to 6 staff members come through really quickly. That was in a period when we were hiring at the system level, and they just put people here who they weren't necessarily, this wasn't the location they wanted to be at, wasn't near where they were, they lived and worked. And so they left for other reasons. And so in that period, it was hard to keep up with who was working with what, because I would assign something to somebody, and by the time they had left, it was like, okay, I don't even remember who's ordering supplies right now. So having something like that in place makes it easier for you to kind of reassign that. It also helps staff members have a place to look and see what their coworkers are working on. And another manager mentioned to me, it also helps you see where the inequities are. Is one of your staff members carrying the brunt of the administrative duties? Are they the one who's signs up for everything that there is to do? Or is there other people available? Are there things that maybe you're missing? So it is really helpful to chart those out. And, oops. And then you're also going to want to review quantitative data and statistics for your location. So as librarians, we like to look at all the numbers and crunch them. I think right now we're in a really challenging time because our normal metrics of success, like high circulation, door count, program attendance, is really different. So right now you may actually have to look at different numbers, or actually look at where things were and where things are going and make new assessments from that. Amelia, if I'm missing anything in the chat, just let me know because I can't see it. All right, and then prioritize what needs to be addressed. So once you've gathered all that information, qualitative and quantitative, you're going to have a list of things that really you do want to change and address. And some of them may be really simple, like there's obviously too many people scheduled on Monday morning, I need to adjust that. Or it may be something that needs a full process added in place. And I would recommend that you prioritize what needs to be addressed and address them not all at once. It's hard not to want to change everything all at once, but if you do too many changes at once, you're either diluting the changes and not fully thinking them out, things that really need a process and a lot of steps to it. You may not give the time it deserves. And then other items, if you're doing multiple big changes at the same time, none of them may stick or have team buy-in. So I'm not saying that you can't make a lot of changes, but you just want to make sure that you're prioritizing them and rolling them out in a systematic way, not just like making changes for change's sake. And that's easy to say as somebody who's already probably done that. So, so lastly, I was going to talk a little bit about beginning building your team. So, I'm gonna stop sharing again because I'd like to get some of your ideas in the chat of ways that you like to team build or to be part of team building. Any ideas? Encourage input from those working with me. Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, is it scrolling down? Let's see. Ask for specific opinions, especially concerning topics in their departments. Peer-to-peer training, learning from each other. That's a good one, Amelia. Actually, with peer-to-peer training, I do recommend that when you have staff meetings, that you have an informal time where you ask your staff if they have attended any trainings since the last staff meeting that they would like to share information with their co-workers about. Showing interest in their projects. Encouraging co-worker who won't talk to you, that's fine. All right. Kudos at meetings, cross-training. I know Joel mentioned earlier that like even as a reference librarian, sometimes you had to do story times. And that's one of those things that I think is really important, is understanding how like knowing every job in your location can actually make you a stronger at your own job. So it may be something you really just don't want to do, but sometimes you gain skills that help you prepare for something else. So I've had a lot of people come through here who wanted to be adult librarians, and they had no interest in doing children's programming. But at my branch size, we mostly do children's programming, and I would encourage them to try it out, because what you find, I became a children's librarian with no children's experience. And when you do children's programming, you get more comfortable with talking to big groups of people, because children are not very judgmental, and you learn that pretty quickly, that like if you're in front of a group of kids and they're just having a good time and they laugh off any mistakes you make, then it makes it a little bit more comfortable. So so I'm going to go back to screen sharing. I think some of the ideas you guys came up with, let's see, were things that I was going to talk about. So let's see, begin building your team. So the first thing I have is meet as a group. This is another one of those things that you think may be a no-brainer, but I worked in Wake County 4 years before I had a group staff meeting. So at that time, it was not an expectation that people met with their staff regularly. And it is really hard in libraries that serve the public to find a time to meet as a group, especially when we're all working different times. So if you do have that kind of situation with your staff where you can't necessarily get somebody to come and cover your location so that you can meet as a staff, I recommend breaking your teams into smaller groups so that you can meet more regularly. For example, maybe meet with your librarians and then meet with your library assistants, or meet with your youth services staff or your adult services staff. The only thing about that you would want to be aware of is that if you regularly meet with smaller groups and you don't mix up those groups, there may be some unintentional resentments created because they think that you are not sharing information with them equally. So for example, if you always meet with your librarians and then meet with your library assistants, even library assistants have been there a while and know your intentions may think that they're not getting the same information. So if you can mix it up so that they are not always having the same group meet together, that is ideal. I can give you actually a specific example. There was a short time period where I had, I want to say 4 vacancies at once. We maybe had a short hiring lapse. And so it was really hard to get enough staff off the desks to meet together. And previously I had always met with all my youth staff, including the librarians and the library assistants at the same time. And during that period, I couldn't get us all off the desk at the same time because we were pretty much it. And so it came out during that time, even though my full-time library assistants had been working for me for like at least 5 years by then, that they felt like they weren't getting the same information as the librarians. And I thought I was sharing all the same information with them, but because I wasn't meeting with them together, they were just starting to feel that they were losing some of that information. So I did figure out a way that we could all meet at least once per program session so they didn't feel like they were missing out on anything. So and then encourage information sharing. Somebody else mentioned that in the chat. I think that it's really important that you encourage informal communication as well as formal communication. You want staff to feel comfortable talking to each other. If you create an environment where everybody feels like they can't even talk to each other, it's just going to create divisions. So do encourage staff members to have time to talk with each other. And I try to make small committees within my location so that they had time to talk about specific topics within their without me actually. So but then another way that I like to encourage information sharing if we can't all be together at the same time, because we're open 9 to 9, well, not anymore, but our hours got cut. But we were open 9 to 9 Monday through Thursday, and 10 to 6 Friday and Saturday, and 1 to 5 on Sunday. So there were some staff who never saw each other at all. So I did create some information sharing opportunities within our break room in staff areas just by, for example, putting up large Post-it notes on the walls with different topics. One thing we had done right before COVID was we had different system goals for the Wake County that we had put up in our break room. And then I invited staff to think about what they did that could help the system reach those goals. And so that tied them into the larger county goals and also created buy-in into what they did on the day-to-day basis. And so we had a staff meeting where we actually broke down and in groups and sat down and looked at those different goals that we were trying to reach, and that did help them kind of see where they fit into that big picture. More recently, since we've been close to the public for because of the pandemic, the larger county, not just the library system, came up with new core values. And so I had at that time I had a lot of staff contact tracing, so they weren't even coming into the library at all, or maybe once or twice a week, while the rest of them they weren't seeing each other much at all. So I wanted them to kind of all have the opportunity to think about how those core values could be incorporated into the work that they did on a daily basis. And so I had one staff member write all those up and put them out on the floor, because we don't have people in the building. So I had them on the tables, and that gave them time to think about them without somebody nearby, and to really think privately about what they could do to help encourage their coworkers and themselves to embody those core values. And then we re-looked at them at our first staff meeting when everybody had stopped contact tracing. And that staff meeting was virtual library. So that's been challenging as well, as just finding ways to team build when you're not all together can be really hard. Does anybody have any suggestions on how they've been able to do some of that team building while they aren't together or while they've been close to the public? Well, I found the chat popped up. So I see that somebody says we try to hold our meetings before we open, but not all staff can always attend. I know that is hard because we cover such wide range of hours and we're serving the public. Has anybody had any great team building exercises that they would like to share in the last 9 months, 6 months? One of the things we did when everybody returned back to our location, I'll talk about this in my next point, but my Sunshine Committee, they actually came up with different questions to ask their coworkers about what they had been doing during this pandemic. So for example, what's the best read you've had since the pandemic started, or what's your favorite binge watch, or what would be your favorite mythical pet? So for me, it was Hedwig from Harry Potter. I just always thought she was beautiful. So we had some really interesting answers. And then also just some fun things like, if you could have all your dishes clean or all your laundry clean, which would you rather have? And so that was just a fun way for us to kind of reconnect since we hadn't really been together for a few months. Somebody said we meet once every other week for a library-wide question and answer. That's great. I know I find it super hard for meet regularly when we're open to the public. When we were all teleworking or contact tracing, we were meeting weekly. But now I'm finding it harder to do that since we cover more hours again. I know some locations are able to do that before opening, but we were not able to do that. Okay, so that last one I had was create a committee. So I talked a few times about creating committees, and librarians are notorious for actually having too many committees, but I do think it helps to have your staff feel like they have input and buy-in on processes and and actual team building exercises if they are part of that process. So specifically here, I'm talking about creating a staff morale committee. In my first library job at UNC, I was part of the staff morale committee, and I was still actually in college when I started working full-time there, and I really did not understand it. I was like, I don't know why I'm part of this. But once I left, I realized that, you know, we were going through a really big renovation where we were all on the same floor, and they were redoing the building at the same time, and there was jackhammering and explosions, and it was really important what we did, which was just bringing lighthearted activities into at the day-to-day of dealing with jackhammers. So but I think especially right now, when we're all dealing with an inordinate amount of stress and dealing with it in different ways, that if you have what I call, instead of staff morale, mine is the Sunshine Committee. And so if you do create a committee like that, I think I would advocate that it is reflective of your staff, so and representative of everybody who works there. So you want to have librarians and library assistants, full-time and part-time. I started off meeting with them in the beginning, but eventually I decided not to be part of that committee because I felt like when I was part of it, it stifled their ideas, because they would look to me to see what I thought was a good idea rather than just coming up with their own good ideas. And so a lot of times if they seem kind of stuck, I might give them a goal to reach for. So for example, before pre-COVID, we had regular potlucks. And so I would just say, you know, continue the regular potlucks, try to find a theme. And they came up with the idea of having a potluck and then having a outing on a night that we all didn't work, that went hand in hand with it. So if it was, you know, March, maybe we did our baked potato potluck and then we went to an Irish pub another night. So, and that really got them excited about the different things that they chose. And it wasn't just my idea, it was their ideas. And they really had a lot of buy-in. Now that, you know, we're not sharing food together and we're not gathering as a group much, I think it's really kind of hard to find some of the ways that we can continue building teams together, but I do think it's possible. And so for example, one of the things I asked them to do, because we haven't, they had just all started working here again, was, since we don't have staff coming in the building, patrons coming in the building, could you create a staff picks display just for staff? So two of the Sunshine Committee members just sent out an email to all the staff to pick their favorite monster read, since it's Halloween week. And people will be putting up their books so that we can share that with each other. All right, so so in kind of summary, I wanted to just say that building a great team requires ongoing communication. It does take a lot of effort, and sometimes it's hard when you have a lot of administrative tasks to do, but it's really important. It also takes time for observation and review. And when I was doing this presentation, it was really clear to me that, you know, since our situation has changed so much and what we do day to day, it may be time for me to do a needs assessment right now, because things are just so different. So it's not something you're going to do once. It's going to be something that, you know, maybe you notice things just aren't working the way they should right now, and take a pause and step back and really reflect on why it's not working. And then fostering connections with your staff. A staff that doesn't work well together really is going to struggle to have great outcomes, and your patrons will notice if you aren't working well together and you're not getting along well together. So I kind of got through all my content pretty quickly. Does anyone questions that they'd like to share? Trying to get my chat again. Okay. I see some more ideas for team building over here now. So we leave arts and crafts supplies out in our break room based on a specific theme monthly. October is painting small pumpkins. I love that idea. When we first closed, we were doing what we called fun breaks. And we even had a spirit week where we all dressed up as a different, kind of like they do at school, where one week was like decades. We did different decades, like we all dressed up as the 80s and the 60s. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that someone said that they've been laid off since May, so they really had no communication from library directors. So that is hard. So does anybody have any questions?
Michelle, I had a question.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm sure you've been a manager for a long time, so you've probably had this experience, but in building a good team and figuring out the strengths of your team, at what point do you realize maybe someone is not suited for their role, or just making that call, and if there has to be a change for their job, or maybe they have to leave? I'm just curious if you have any thoughts about that decision-making process.
Yeah, I think that, even though you want to support people as much as you can, there are points where you just see that no matter what you're doing, they're not going to be successful in this position. And I have had to go through some disciplinaries with people and actually go through some coaching situations. And I think, it can be really hard, but it can also be really rewarding. I actually have 2 examples where I was having staff members who really weren't meeting expectations. They were coming, they were having trouble with basic work things like, coming to work on time, but they were also not getting their work done, or they were openly refusing to do work. And we sat down and talked about it, and I kind of coached them for a while. And after a year, it came back around and they did improve. And in both situations, it was really clear as we went through the process that it wasn't anything that I was doing or anything that was happening at the library, but both of them were dealing with really big personal changes. And so I do think recognizing when it's a bad fit versus a bad time for somebody is really important, because if it is a bad time, it may be as simple as referring them to an employee assistance program if you have one, encouraging them to get some help outside of work, being patient with them, giving them really clear guidelines to get back on track. And then some people just aren't going to work. I had that as well. I had somebody who literally every staff member, including the pages, complained about. And I kept meeting with them, and they openly refused to acknowledge that anything they were doing was wrong, and it just didn't work out. So I think it's really important to step back and look at what the cause is, because that'll help you determine what path to take with it. I don't know if that really answers it, but I have kind of experienced that. And I did have on my presentation a last page that had some recommended resources, and I'm going to go back to sharing it if nobody has any. Somebody's laughing. What's my number one piece of advice for brand new managers? I think really that number one piece of advice would be not to get that piece that I kind of said in the beginning, that was like my intro, is just don't get bogged down in all the little details of what you have to get done, and make time for your staff, because it is really easy to get swept up in the fact. And I have to remind myself this all the time. I mean, right now I'm really feeling it because I was telling Amelia, I'm only working 24 hours a week because I'm taking days off to help with my kids at home. And so, when I come in, I realize that sometimes I'm just really frantically trying to get through all the things that have to get done. I got to reconcile my receipts, and I need to do timesheets, and I need to do all these little things that take up time. But it's really important to remember to pause and just talk to your staff. Our director says all the time that, like, he used to just walk around and talk to everybody in his library, and people would be like, all you've done today is talk to people. And he's like, that's actually a lot of your job. And so you need to remind yourself that if you do take that time to just have what seems like small talk with your staff, it's actually a really important part of your job, because it shows you, things that'll come out will be like, oh, well, we're concerned about this, or this thing's happening in my life right now, and that's making it really hard for me to focus on this. And if you're not having those conversations, it's real easy to miss things that are happening. So it seems like funny advice to just say, make sure you talk to people, but I have to remind myself all the time that that's one of the important parts of my job. Anybody else have any questions? I'm not sure if you feel like you've reached the outcomes from that I said at the beginning of the presentation, but I do hope that I've impressed upon you the importance of just communicating with your staff regularly, meeting with them regularly. I do have a page of recommended resources that I'm going to share with you. Some of you have probably already heard of some of these, but they were things I really wanted to talk about today, but I knew I didn't have time. The Making of a Manager is a book that came out pretty recently. Julie Zhao is one of the managers at Facebook, and she's been there really from the beginning, and that's a really good one for new managers. I listened to it on audio, didn't even know that it was really for new managers, and I would recommend it to people who are long-time managers as well, because I think she just has really good insight, and she has a very different approach to my own, so I felt like I learned a lot from her. But she really approaches it from, okay, now you're a manager, now what? And a lot of the things we talked about today, like how to get to know your staff. She has a section on how to run meetings and provide feedback. And then the generations at work. I took the class that Wake County had before I became manager, and I think it really helped me understand the differences in our generations that were working here when I started. And it now includes Generation X and Y. And then First Break All the Rules, which is one that I read when I first became manager here, and where I learned that you can't really treat everybody the same because we're all different. So,
Michelle, there was one question, and might need a little more elaboration from Bonnie about this, but what about when the small talk doesn't work? So I think that was in relation to something you said before the resources slide.
Okay. Can you clarify a little bit? Like, why I keep losing the.
I think maybe in talking about how the manager is like walking around, like interacting with people, getting to know people in that small talk way, maybe. But if Bonnie, if you have other thoughts, if you want to add those.
Well, I think too, it also can be distracting if it's needless. So also knowing when you're keeping people from getting other things done is also important. I'm not sure if that's, and also, sometimes it's hard to communicate with people that you just otherwise don't really get along well with. I think Joel talked about that a little bit in his presentation earlier. You know, learning how to empathize when you really just don't get along well with somebody can be really hard, because sometimes we just have different personalities. Oh, okay. Well, and so Bonnie's mentioning here that when things seem to be going well and then asking something to be done differently, someone becomes really distressed. Okay, you have somebody who's just having trouble to communicate with. Have you taken them aside individually and try to say, you know, I've been trying to talk to you about XYZ, and I feel like that I'm not communicating clearly. Is there something different that I should be saying or doing? I personally, like, I have a staff member here right now who I get along really great with, but I find often that if I communicate something to her in email, she reads it in a completely different way than I expected her to. Like she goes off on a completely different tangent, and then she'll come and tell me I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and I'm like, that's not what I said to do. So sometimes it's how, like, maybe I've had a couple staff members tell me, you know, I don't really do well with communication through verbal communication. I do better with email, and vice versa. Like, some people say I'm really just not good with email. So it may just be a conversation more about communication than the issue. You know, like, is there a better way that we could be communicating? Or is there something outside of work that seems to be bothering you? I mean, you don't have to pry, but you can just say, I've noticed you've seemed kind of agitated lately. Is there something that I can help you with? Is there something that I just don't know about that maybe I could help with? Yeah, a third party could help. You know, I've had to have moderated conversations with people who weren't getting along in my location before. Sometimes having somebody from HR can help, but that's really kind of, I mean, that was a kind of extreme example where they just really weren't getting along with each other. And even me meeting with them individually didn't work, but it can sometimes, like Meg said, feel like an inquisition. So I'd start more with, like, just taking a moment to see if there's something that maybe you're missing. A progressive issue. Yeah. You know, like I said, I did have that one person who really just, no matter what you know, when you were addressing things that were even factual. So if you have been trying to talk about it and it's not going anywhere, that's when you go to facts. So, like, very visible things, like, I asked you to do this by this time and you didn't do it. Why? You know, they can't dispute that. Now, the person I was talking about before, they would dispute it. And I'm like, no, I have documented evidence that you didn't do this. Why didn't you do it? You know, so if you don't want to, if you're just not connecting with them otherwise, it always helps to really just stick directly to undisputable facts, because there isn't any way for them to question that. And if it just doesn't get better, then maybe you are going through a disciplinary process. Not everybody, you know, Wake County has a very formal process, and we have to write things up and lawyers have to go over it. But not everybody has that. So if you don't have that, if, you know, looking online for kind of a formal disciplinary framework to kind of build those conversations on could be helpful. I don't know if that helps, but do please feel free to reach out to me more if you want. I did include my email in the slides, and Amelia is going to be sending out the slides to everybody, as well as the pictures of the resources. And I do have a coaching document that somebody from HR gave me a long time ago that I really felt helped me with those conversations. So Bonnie, if you want to email me about that, I can try to find it and scan it for you, because it really did have a good outline of how to, and it was a paid resource that they had that I don't think you'd find another way. So and Joy Whitfield put a blog in there. Askmanager.org is a manager blog that has some great scripts. So. Okay, well, it looks like we've got a lot of people heading out. So I hope everybody enjoyed our conversation today. And if, like I said, if there's anything that you would like to talk further to me about, don't hesitate to email me. I am taking multiple days off a week to help with my children. So if you don't get a response from me, it's because I'm doing virtual school. But I will get back to you.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.